Welcome back, friends. Tonight we journey to ancient Greece, to the moment when beauty itself was born from the sea. Rest now, and listen. Before love existed, before beauty graced the world, there was only the beginning. Sky embraced earth, and their children were the Titans. Ouranos, the sky father, was cruel to his children. He imprisoned the youngest in the depths of Tartarus, and Gaia wept for them. The Earth Mother could bear no more. She forged a great sickle of adamantine and called to her Titan sons for aid against their father. Only Kronos, the youngest and boldest, dared accept. He took the sickle and waited where sky descended to meet Earth each evening. When Ouranos descended to embrace Gaia that night, Kronos struck. The sickle sang through starlight, severing the sky god from the earth forever. Ouranos' divine essence fell into the sea. Where it touched the waves, the water began to foam and churn with strange new light. From that violence, something unexpected stirred. In the foam of the sea, where sky had met water, a new divinity was taking form. The foam gathered and swirled. It rose from the waves like a living thing, taking shape slowly, impossibly. The sea itself was giving birth. And from the foam emerged Aphrodite, fully formed, utterly perfect. The goddess of love and beauty opened her eyes for the first time. Her first breath drew the attention of every living thing. Dolphins rose to greet her, and doves descended from the heavens in joyful flight. Where her feet first touched the water, flowers bloomed upon the waves. Roses grew from sea foam itself, pink and white and impossibly fragrant. She stepped onto a great shell that rose to carry her. The zephyr wind himself blew gently to guide her toward the shores of Cyprus. As she neared the land, the Horai, goddesses of the seasons, waited on the shore with robes of finest gold to clothe her divine form. The moment her foot touched the sand of Cyprus, grass grew green where there had been only stone. Flowers burst from barren earth. This was the power of Aphrodite, not just beauty to behold, but beauty that creates. Where she walked, the world became more lovely. Word of the new goddess spread across the earth and up to Olympus itself. Even the gods paused to wonder at what had emerged. Aphrodite had been born from the oldest violence, and would bring the newest force into the world. Love itself had arrived among gods and mortals. Who was this goddess born from sea and sky? Aphrodite was beauty itself given form. But she was far more than a pretty face. She commanded the force that draws all things together. Love, desire, attraction. These were her domain, and even gods bowed to their power. The myrtle tree was sacred to her, its sweet scent filling her temples. Roses grew wherever she walked, red and white and pink. Doves were her constant companions, symbols of the gentle love she could inspire. They pulled her chariot across the sky on soft white wings. But sparrows too attended her, small fierce birds representing the passion that could consume even the wisest heart. Love has many faces. She possessed a magical girdle, a golden sash woven with enchantment. Whoever wore it became irresistible. Even Hera borrowed it once to seduce Zeus. Aphrodite could be gentle as spring rain or terrible as summer storms. She blessed true lovers and destroyed those who scorned her gifts. Those who denied love's power learned harsh lessons. Hippolytus scorned romance and was dragged to death. Aphrodite's gifts were not optional. Yet she could also show mercy and tenderness. Lovers who honored her received her protection, their bonds blessed by the goddess herself. The three graces danced in her company. Aglaia, Euphrosyne, and Thalia. Charm, joy, and festivity were her constant attendants on Olympus. And there were the Erotes, winged spirits of desire, sometimes called her children. They flew through the world spreading attraction wherever they went. This was Aphrodite in her fullness, goddess of beauty, yes, but also of the force that makes life worth living. Now let us see her among the gods. When Aphrodite arrived on Olympus, every god turned to stare. Zeus himself descended from his throne to welcome this new divine presence. Zeus, king of the gods, regarded her with calculating eyes. Here was power, and power on Olympus needed to be managed carefully. Hera, queen and wife of Zeus, watched the newcomer with barely concealed hostility. Another beautiful goddess was the last thing she wanted. The other goddesses measured Aphrodite silently. Athena, wise and warlike, seemed unimpressed. Artemis, virgin huntress, turned away with disdain. But the gods, Male and Im, look away. Apollo's lyre fell silent. Hermes froze mid-flight. Poseidon's trident trembled in his grip. Zeus saw trouble brewing. If the gods fought over Aphrodite, Olympus itself might crack. He needed a solution, and quickly found one. There was one god no one would envy. One god so unlike Aphrodite that the match seemed almost cruel. Hephaestus, god of the forge. Hephaestus had been cast from Olympus twice, once by Hera who despised his lameness, once by Zeus in a fit of rage. He knew rejection. But in his volcanic forge, Hephaestus created wonders. Golden automatons that could move and speak. Armor that could turn any blade. Zeus announced the match. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty, would wed Hephaestus, god of the forge. The Olympians fell silent in shock. Aphrodite did not protest. What point in arguing with the king of gods? But her eyes held no warmth when she looked at her husband, to be. The wedding was held in Hephaestus's forge, the only place he felt at home. Fire and beauty stood together before the gods. Hephaestus loved her instantly and completely. How could he not? Every creation afterward, he made for her, jewelry beyond mortal dreams. He built her a palace on Olympus with walls of pearl and floors of polished rose quartz. Every detail spoke of his adoration. Aphrodite accepted his gifts with distant gratitude. She never mocked him, never showed cruelty. She simply felt nothing at all. How strange that the goddess of love could not love. Or perhaps she simply could not love where she was commanded to love. Then one day she saw Ares. The god of war stood bloodied from battle, armor dented, eyes wild with violence, and she felt her heart stir. He was everything her husband was not. Passionate, dangerous, alive with fire. Where Hephaestus was gentle, Ares was a storm-given form. Ares noticed Aphrodite watching him. Even the god of war was not immune to her power. He smiled, and wars had been started by less. Their affair began in secret. While Hephaestus worked in his forge, Aphrodite slipped away to meet the god of war in hidden places. They met in his war camps, among the spears and blood. They met in her rose gardens, where violence seemed impossible. Opposites entangled. Ares forgot whole wars when he was with her. Aphrodite discovered passion she had never known. Together, they created something neither could alone. The other gods whispered, of course. Olympus was a small community, and secrets traveled fast, but none dared tell Hephaestus directly. Apollo alone spoke the truth. Perhaps as god of truth he could not stay silent. Perhaps he was simply cruel. He told the smith god everything. Hephaestus said nothing. He simply turned back to his anvil and began to work. But what he created now was not jewelry or art. For days he worked, forging chains so fine they were nearly invisible. So strong that even gods could not break them. A trap for his unfaithful wife. He hung the chains above his own bed, invisible and waiting. Then he announced he was leaving. A trip to his beloved island of Lemnos. Word reached Aphrodite quickly. Her husband was gone. Within the hour, Ares arrived at her door, eager as a boy despite his violent divinity. They did not notice the gossamer threads above. Lost in each other, they fell onto Hephaestus's bed, and the trap sprang closed around them. The chains held fast. Ares roared and struggled, but even the god of war could not break free. Aphrodite lay still, knowing what would come. Hephaestus had not gone to Lemnos. He stood in the doorway now, and his broken face held terrible satisfaction. He had caught them both. But humiliation required witnesses. Hephaestus called out to all of Olympus, inviting the gods to see what love's goddess did in secret. They came, Zeus, Poseidon, Hermes, Apollo. The male gods gathered around the bed, staring at the exposed lovers with undisguised amusement. The goddesses refused to attend. They would not participate in another woman's shame, even a rival's. Some dignities were worth keeping. Hermes looked at Aphrodite caught in the chains, still beautiful even in disgrace. He whispered to Apollo that he would gladly take Ares's place. Poseidon grew serious. He asked Hephaestus to release them, promising that Ares would pay whatever price the smith god demanded for the insult. Hephaestus hesitated. His revenge was complete. Every god had seen. What more could humiliation give him? Slowly, he released the chains. Ares vanished instantly, fleeing to Thrace to nurse his wounded pride among his worshippers. The god of war had never felt so defeated. Aphrodite did not flee. She rose from the bed with all the dignity of the sea from which she had come. She would not be shamed. She walked to her temple in Paphos in Cyprus, where she had first touched land. There she bathed in sacred waters, renewing herself. The Graces came to her there, clothing her in fresh robes of softest white. They did not speak of what had happened. They simply served. When she emerged from the temple, she was Aphrodite again, fully herself, undiminished. Scandal could not touch what she truly was. Hephaestus watched her from his forge. He had won nothing. His wife did not love him more for having caught her. She did not love him at all. Their marriage continued, a formality among gods. She gave him courtesy, he gave her gifts. Neither gave what the other truly wanted. And Ares, he returned eventually. The affair continued more carefully now. Some loves cannot be killed, even by public humiliation. From their union came children, Eros reborn as their son in some tellings, and Phobos and Deimos, fear and terror, who followed their father to war. Harmonia too was born to them, goddess of harmony, as if the universe itself tried to balance what her parents represented. The scandal faded as scandals do even among gods. Other dramas captured Olympus's attention. Aphrodite remained what she had always been. But something had changed in Aphrodite. She had learned that even goddesses could be trapped, humiliated, exposed. Power had limits. She would never truly love Hephaestus, but she learned to appreciate his gifts, his patience, his uncomplaining devotion. Pity is not love, but it is something. Hephaestus, for his part, never stopped creating beautiful things for her. Perhaps creating beauty for beauty's goddess was enough purpose for his immortal life. The other gods learned lessons too. Never bet against Hephaestus's cleverness. Never assume beauty means weakness. Never think you know what a god will do. And what of Ares, the god of war who loved the goddess of love? He remained her companion across centuries, faithful in his fashion. Their story tells us something the Greeks understood well, that love and war are never truly separate. Each requires the other to exist. Without passion, there would be nothing worth fighting for. Without conflict, love would have no obstacles to prove itself against. Aphrodite ruled over all of this. The gentle and the fierce, the faithful and the forbidden. Love in all its forms answered to her. But she was about to face her greatest challenge. A mortal girl whose beauty rivaled her own, and whose love would shake Olympus itself. Her name was Psyche, and mortals had begun to worship her instead of Aphrodite. The goddess of beauty would not tolerate such blasphemy. A new chapter was about to begin, one of jealousy and impossible tasks, of love that defies even gods, of a mortal who would become immortal. Rest here a moment, dear listener. We have traveled far tonight. When you are ready, we shall follow Psyche into the heart of love's greatest mystery. In a kingdom far from Olympus, a king had 3 daughters. The youngest was named Psyche, and her beauty surpassed all mortal measure. Psyche's beauty was so great that people traveled from distant lands simply to look upon her face. They brought flowers instead of offerings. They began to call her the new Aphrodite. They built shrines to Psyche, neglecting the true goddess's temples across the land. Word of this blasphemy reached Olympus. Aphrodite heard mortals praising a human girl above herself, and her divine blood turned cold with fury. She descended to earth in mortal disguise, walking among the crowds who worshipped Psyche. She saw for herself what they adored. Psyche was indeed beautiful, achingly, impossibly beautiful for a mortal. But she was not a goddess. She had not been born from sea foam and sky. Aphrodite returned to Olympus, her mind burning with plans for vengeance. This mortal would learn the price of receiving worship meant for gods. She called for her son Eros, the god of desire himself, whose arrows could make anyone fall hopelessly in love with whatever they first saw. Aphrodite commanded him to punish Psyche, make her fall in love with the most hideous creature alive, a monster, a beggar, something vile. Eros accepted the task as he always did. He took his golden bow and his heart, tipped arrows and flew down to the mortal world. He found Psyche sleeping in her chambers, moonlight streaming across her face. He drew back his arrow, ready to curse her with terrible love. But then she stirred. Her eyes flickered open for just a moment, and Eros, god of desire, looked into them and was lost forever. In his shock, his hand slipped. His own arrow scratched his skin, and the god of love felt love himself, deeper than any he had ever caused. He fled into the night, unable to complete his mother's command. How could he curse Psyche now? She was already cursed, to be loved by a god. Aphrodite waited for news of Psyche's degradation. When none came, her fury deepened. Something had gone wrong with her perfect plan. Meanwhile, Psyche's life grew stranger. Despite her beauty, no suitor came to ask for her hand. Men worshipped her, but none dared to love her. Her sisters married well, finding happiness with ordinary princes. But Psyche, the most beautiful woman alive, remained alone. Her parents grew worried. The king sought guidance from Apollo's oracle at Delphi. The answer that came back was terrible beyond his worst imaginings. The oracle decreed that Psyche must be dressed for death and left upon a rocky cliff. There, a monster would come to claim her as his bride. The kingdom mourned. Psyche was dressed in funeral white and led through weeping crowds to a barren cliff above the churning sea. Her parents wept as they left her there alone. The wind howled around the cliff's edge, and the sea crashed far below. Psyche waited to die. But death did not come. Instead, the gentle west wind, Zephyrus himself, lifted her from the cliff and carried her softly through the night air. He set her down in a valley of impossible beauty, flowers that never wilted, trees heavy with golden fruit, a river of crystal clear water. Before her rose a palace that could only have been built by gods. Walls of gold and silver, columns of precious gems, doors that opened on their own. Psyche entered, wondering if she had died after all, and this was some blessed afterlife. Invisible hands guided her to a chamber of silk and roses. She was bathed by hands she could not see, dressed in robes finer than any queen's, fed delicacies that tasted of ambrosia. She was a prisoner in paradise. When night fell, she was led to a bedchamber of unimaginable splendor. And in the darkness, she heard footsteps. Her mysterious husband had come. He came only in darkness, never allowing her to see his face. His voice was gentle, his touch tender. He called her his beloved, his bride. Eros had claimed her as his own. But he could not reveal himself. If his mother learned he had disobeyed, her vengeance would be terrible. Night after night he came to her, and day after day she wandered the enchanted palace alone. She grew to love him, though she knew not who he was. But loneliness crept in. She missed her family, her sisters, the human world. She begged her invisible husband to let her see them again. Against his better judgment, Eros agreed. Zephyrus would bring her sisters to the enchanted valley. But he made Psyche promise, never try to see his face. Her sisters came, carried by the west wind as Psyche had been. They entered the magnificent palace and could not hide their astonishment, or their envy. Psyche showed them every wonder. The invisible servants, the endless banquets, the treasures beyond counting. She spoke of her husband's kindness, his tender words. But when they asked to see this marvelous husband, Psyche fell silent. She admitted she had never seen his face. He came only in darkness. Her sister's envy transformed into something they called concern. What if her husband was the monster the oracle foretold? What if he was fattening her for slaughter? They urged her to discover the truth. Wait until he sleeps, they said. Light a lamp, look upon his face. Keep a knife ready, just in case. The sisters departed, leaving Psyche alone with her new fears. Every tender word from her husband now seemed potentially a monster's deception. That night, when her husband came to her in darkness and fell asleep in her arms, Psyche made her choice. She reached for the hidden lamp. She lit the flame with shaking hands. The light bloomed golden, pushing back the shadows. And Psyche beheld her husband's face for the first time. No monster lay beside her. Instead, she saw the most beautiful being she had ever beheld, Eros himself, god of love, his golden wings folded in sleep. Psyche gasped at his beauty. His bow and quiver of heart arrows lay beside the bed. She understood now. She was beloved by love itself. She leaned closer, drinking in every detail of his divine face. In her trembling hand, the lamp tilted, and a drop of burning oil fell upon his shoulder. Eros woke with a cry of pain. His eyes flew open to see Psyche standing over him, lamp in hand. The promise was broken. Trust was destroyed. He did not rage or strike her. He simply looked at her with infinite sadness, and then his wings unfurled and lifted him from the bed. Love cannot live where trust has died, he told her. You chose to doubt instead of believe. Now I must leave, and you must face what comes. Psyche fell to her knees, begging him to stay. She dropped the lamp, spilling oil across the floor. But Eros flew out into the darkness. The moment he left, the enchantment broke. The golden walls faded like morning mist. The palace dissolved around her like a dream ending. Psyche found herself alone on the hillside where Zephyrus had first set her down. The palace was gone. The paradise was gone. Eros was gone. She wept there until the sun rose fully. Then she rose to her feet, and a new determination filled her heart. She would find Eros again. She wandered the world searching for him. She asked every river god, every mountain spirit, every divine being she encountered. None would help her. The gods feared Aphrodite's wrath. To help Psyche was to oppose the goddess of love herself. Even kind-hearted deities sent the mortal away. Her sisters, she discovered, had met grim fates. They had tried to leap to the enchanted valley themselves, certain Eros would love them too. Zephyrus had not caught them. They had fallen to their deaths, destroyed by the very jealousy that destroyed Psyche's happiness. The oracle's prophecy took its toll. Psyche mourned them despite their betrayal. They were still her sisters. But she could not stop her quest. She had to find Eros or die trying. Meanwhile, Eros had flown to his mother's palace on Olympus. The burn on his shoulder ached, but the wound in his heart ached more. Aphrodite found her son there, nursing his burn. When she learned what had happened, her rage knew no bounds, but not for the reason Eros expected. "You defied me," she screamed. "You were supposed to curse her with monstrous love. Instead you loved her yourself. You chose a mortal over your own mother." Eros was too heartbroken to argue. He retreated to his chambers and would not come out. Without the god of desire, no love bloomed anywhere in the world. Crops failed because farmers had no love for their land. Marriages crumbled. Children were not born. Even animals stopped seeking mates. The world grew cold. Zeus himself began to worry. Without love, the world would die. He could not force Eros to work. Even the king of gods cannot command the heart. But Aphrodite cared nothing for the world's suffering. She cared only for her wounded pride. Somewhere out there, Psyche still lived, and that was unacceptable. She sent word throughout the divine realm. Whoever brought her Psyche would receive her favor. Whoever helped the mortal would face her eternal wrath. Psyche heard of Aphrodite's hunt. She was afraid, but not enough to stop. If she could not find Eros, perhaps she could find his mother instead. There was only one way to prove her love for Eros. She would go to Aphrodite herself. She would beg the goddess for forgiveness, or die. She climbed to Aphrodite's greatest temple and knelt at the altar. She called out to the goddess, surrendering herself to whatever judgment came. Aphrodite appeared in a blaze of terrible beauty. Her eyes held no mercy, no warmth. She looked at Psyche the way a hawk looks at a mouse. So the goddess said with poisonous sweetness, "You finally come to me. The mortal who stole worship meant for me. The thief who took my son." Psyche did not defend herself. She simply said she loved Eros with all her heart and would do anything to win back what her doubt had destroyed. Aphrodite smiled then, a smile more terrible than her rage. "Anything, you say very well. I will give you a chance to prove this love." She seized Psyche by the hair and dragged her to a great storehouse. Inside, a mountain of mixed seeds rose to the ceiling. Wheat, barley, millet, all jumbled. "Sort them," Aphrodite commanded. "Separate every grain by type before nightfall. If even one seed is misplaced, you will never see my son again." Then the goddess vanished, leaving Psyche alone with a task no mortal could complete. The girl fell to her knees, knowing she had failed before beginning. But she was not as alone as she thought. An army of tiny ants, sacred to the earth itself, emerged from cracks in the floor. They pitied the girl who loved so deeply. Working together in their countless thousands, they sorted every grain. By sunset, the seeds were perfectly separated. When Aphrodite returned, she found Psyche standing before the sorted seeds, exhausted but triumphant. The goddess's face twisted with frustrated rage. "Someone helped you," the goddess snarled. "No mortal could do this alone. But it matters not. You have only begun to prove your worth. Tomorrow you will face another task," Aphrodite declared. "And another. Until you fail. Or until I am satisfied that your love is true." Psyche was given a cell in Aphrodite's temple, prisoner rather than guest. But she had survived the first task. Hope, fragile but real, bloomed in her heart. Somewhere in his darkened chamber on Olympus, Eros felt something shift. His beloved was near. She was fighting for him. His heart ached with pride and fear. He could not go to her. His wound had weakened him, and his mother watched his every movement. But he whispered prayers to any god who would listen. The gods of Olympus watched this drama unfold with fascination. Even Zeus, who rarely cared for mortal affairs, found himself moved by Psyche's courage. Hera, surprisingly, felt a kinship with Psyche. She too knew what it was to love a being more powerful than herself. She too knew jealousy's sting. But none dared openly help. Aphrodite's rage was legendary, and her capacity for vengeance was infinite. Psyche would have to face most trials alone. Night fell over Aphrodite's temple. Psyche lay in her cell, knowing tomorrow would bring a new impossible task. But she had survived today. That was enough. She thought of Eros, his gentle voice in the darkness, his tender touch. She had doubted him once. She would never doubt her love for him again. Whatever Aphrodite demanded, she would face it. Whatever price love required, she would pay it. She had been born mortal, but she would love like a goddess. And so the first great trial ended. Psyche had faced the goddess of love herself and had not been destroyed. But greater challenges awaited. The seeds were sorted. The first victory was won. But Aphrodite was far from finished, and the tasks to come would make this one seem simple. Rest now, listener. We pause here at the turning of the tide. Psyche has proven herself once, but love's trials have only just begun. More awaits us soon. Dawn broke over Aphrodite's temple, and Psyche rose to face her second day of trials. She had survived the impossible once. Could she do it again? Aphrodite appeared in a swirl of rose petals. But these petals had thorns, and they scratched Psyche's skin as the goddess approached with cruel intent. The goddess led Psyche to a window overlooking a distant meadow. There, golden sheep grazed beside a river. But these were no ordinary sheep. Their fleece shone like captured sunlight, and their horns were sharp as swords. These were the sheep of Helios, god of the sun, wild, fierce, and deadly. "Bring me a hank of their golden fleece," Aphrodite commanded. Her smile suggested she expected Psyche to be gored to death in the attempt. Psyche walked toward the meadow, her heart heavy with despair. The sheep saw her coming and began to paw the ground, lowering their gilded horns. She reached the river's edge and prepared to wade across. to her certain death. But then a voice rose from the water, gentle and green. The river god's reeds whispered wisdom to her. "Wait," they said. "Do not approach the sheep while the sun is high. They are mad with solar fire at noon. Wait until evening," the reeds continued, "when the sheep rest in the shade. Then gather the fleece they leave caught on the brambles. No death required." Psyche waited as the sun crossed the sky. When shadows lengthened and the sheep grew calm, she crept to the bramble bushes along the meadow's edge. There, caught on thorns where the sheep had passed, hung strands of golden fleece, glowing softly in the fading light. She gathered them with trembling hands. When she returned to Aphrodite with hands full of shining fleece, the goddess could not hide her shock. Again, the mortal had survived. "Twice now you have cheated death," Aphrodite said through gritted teeth. "But cleverness alone will not save you. The third task requires something more." She pointed toward a distant mountain, where a waterfall cascaded from impossible heights. At its source, the river Styx itself fell from the underworld above. "Bring me water from that source," Aphrodite commanded, handing Psyche a small crystal flask. "The rocks are guarded by dragons that never sleep." Psyche took the flask and began the long climb. Each step brought her closer to the roar of falling water and the hiss of serpentine guardians. The rocks themselves seemed to warn her away. They bore the shapes of those who had tried before, petrified mortals frozen in eternal climbing. She reached the source at last, a churning pool where black water bubbled up from the underworld itself. Dragons coiled on every rock, eyes burning. There was no clever solution this time. No waiting, no gathering scraps. The dragons saw her and began to unfurl their wings with deadly intent. But then a shadow fell from above. Vast wings, a curved beak, talons like swords. Zeus's own eagle descended from Olympus, answering prayers Psyche had never spoken. The eagle had watched this mortal's trials with admiration. She had shown courage worthy of the gods. He would help her this once. He took the flask in his great talons and flew over the dragons, over the churning pool, dipping the crystal vessel into the black waters of Styx. When he returned and placed the filled flask in Psyche's hands, she wept with gratitude. Even the gods, it seemed, could be moved by love's persistence. She descended the mountain as stars emerged above. 3 tasks complete. 3 times she should have died, and yet she still breathed. When Aphrodite saw the Styx water, something shifted in her divine face. This mortal was not supposed to survive. This was not how the story should go. But the goddess of love had one final task, the cruelest of all. For this one, there would be no river gods or eagles to help. "Tomorrow," Aphrodite said softly, "you will journey to the underworld itself. You will stand before Persephone, queen of the dead, and ask her for a gift. Bring me a box of Persephone's beauty," she continued. "Tell her I need it, that the cares of nursing my wounded son have dimmed my radiance." Psyche knew what this meant. No mortal entered the underworld and returned. This was not a task, it was an execution with extra steps. Yet she did not refuse. If death was the price of proving her love for Eros, she would pay it gladly. Tomorrow, she would descend into darkness. Psyche stood before the entrance to the underworld. A cave mouth yawning in the mountainside, like a wound in the earth that never healed. How does a mortal enter the realm of the dead and return? She had no guide, no map. Only love drove her forward into the darkness. But a voice came to her then, from a high tower she had passed, whose ancient stones held ancient wisdom. The tower spoke and told her the way. "Carry 2 coins in your mouth," the tower said, "for Charon the ferryman demands payment both ways. Carry 2 cakes to appease the 3-headed guardian. And most importantly, do not open the box. Whatever Persephone gives you, do not look inside. Bring it sealed to Aphrodite, or all will be lost." Armed with this knowledge, Psyche descended. The path wound downward through stone and shadow, growing colder with every step away from the living sun. She passed shades of the dead drifting in the darkness, pale wisps of those who had lived and died. They reached toward her warmth, her life. The tower had warned her help no one. Pity would trap her here forever. So she walked on, even when a dying man begged for water. She came at last to the river Styx, black waters that separated the world of the living from the realm of the dead. A boat waited there. Charon the ferryman stood in his boat, ancient, hooded, hand outstretched for payment. Without a coin, no one crossed. With a coin, anyone could. Psyche dropped one coin from her mouth into his bony palm. Charon nodded once and gestured for her to board. The crossing had begun. The boat glided through absolute darkness. No sound but the oar dipping into black water. Psyche saw lights on the far shore. Cold, blue, unwelcoming. When the boat touched the far shore, Psyche stepped into the underworld proper. The air tasted of earth and endings. Nothing grew here. Nothing changed. Before her rose the gates of Hades's palace, and before those gates sat Cerberus, the three-headed dog who guarded the boundary between death and deeper death. Each head was larger than a lion's. Each mouth held teeth that could crush divine bronze. But Psyche remembered the tower's advice, and the cakes. She tossed one cake, and all three heads lunged for it. While they fought over the sweet morsel, she slipped past into the palace beyond. The palace of Hades was vast and cold, black marble and silver shadows. Shades of the dead wandered its halls, serving masters they could not remember. Psyche walked through chambers of judgment, past rivers of forgetfulness, through gardens of pale asphodels that had never seen the sun. At last she came to the throne room. There sat Persephone, queen of the dead, beautiful and terrible, wearing a crown of black flowers and bones. Persephone looked upon Psyche with eyes that had seen every death since death began. She recognized love's desperation. She knew it from her own story. Psyche knelt and spoke her request. Aphrodite wished for a portion of Persephone's beauty, to restore what caring for wounded arrows had cost her. Persephone smiled, the first smile Psyche had seen in this gray realm. She took the box and withdrew to her chambers, returning moments later. "Here is what you seek," the queen said, placing the sealed box back in Psyche's hands. "Take it to Aphrodite, and do not open it yourself." Psyche thanked the queen of the dead and turned to leave. She had done it, obtained the impossible. Now she only had to return to the living world. She retraced her steps through the pale gardens, past the judgment halls, toward the gates where Cerberus waited. The second cake bought her passage out. Charon waited at the Styx, patient as eternity. Her second coin bought the crossing back. The black waters parted for the boat's prow once more. She climbed the long path upward, past reaching shades she still could not help, toward light that grew stronger with every step. Life called to her. When she emerged from the cave mouth into sunlight, she fell to her knees and wept. She had entered the underworld, and returned. No mortal had done such a thing. But as she rested there, a thought crept into her mind. She had the box. She had Persephone's beauty. And she was so tired, so worn. What if she used just a little? Just enough to restore what these trials had taken from her. Surely Eros would love her more if she were beautiful again. The tower had warned her. Persephone had warned her. But Psyche was mortal, and mortals are not perfect. Her fingers found the clasp and lifted it. There was no beauty inside, only sleep. The deep, deathless sleep of the underworld poured out like black smoke and wrapped itself around Psyche's mind. She collapsed beside the cave entrance, the box fallen open beside her. She did not breathe. Her heart barely beat. She lay between life and death. And there she would have remained forever, a mortal claimed by death's beauty, never to wake again. But love, true love, has power even over death. On Olympus, Eros felt something break in his heart. The wound on his shoulder had healed, but suddenly a worse pain seized him. Psyche was dying. He did not think of his mother's rage. He did not think of consequences. He only knew that somewhere, his beloved was slipping away, and he could not allow it. Eros flew faster than he had ever flown, faster than desire itself travels between hearts. His wings blazed gold against the blue sky. He found her lying motionless outside the underworld's gate, pale as the shades within. The opened box lay beside her, its deadly gift spent. Carefully, so carefully, Eros gathered the underworld sleep back into the box. With gentle fingers, he closed it and set it aside. Then he turned to Psyche. He touched her cheek with an arrow's point, not to wound, but to wake. The prick of love's own weapon could rouse anyone from any sleep. Psyche's eyes fluttered open. She saw Eros's face above her, not in shadow now, but in full divine glory. And his eyes held only love, not judgment. She wept and asked forgiveness, for the lamp, for the doubt, for opening the box. Eros silenced her with a kiss. All was forgiven. All had always been forgiven. But they could not remain here hiding from his mother. Their love had been tested. Now it was time for it to be recognized. Eros had a plan. He took her hand and flew upward, carrying his mortal beloved toward the mountain of the gods. If Olympus would not accept her, he would leave forever. The gods saw them coming. The god of love and the mortal who had walked through the underworld for him. Even Aphrodite paused in her rage. Eros landed before Zeus himself, Psyche still in his arms. He laid his case before the king of gods, and the king of gods listened. Zeus had watched this drama unfold with growing interest. Here was a mortal who had bested every challenge, even death itself. Such courage deserved recognition. And here was his grandson Eros, god of love, willing to abandon everything for this mortal girl. Was this not the very force that made creation worthwhile? Zeus raised his hand for silence. The court of Olympus fell still. Every god, goddess, spirit, and nymph waited for the king's judgment. He turned to Aphrodite, who stood with barely contained fury. "Your tasks were meant to destroy her," he said. "Instead, they have proven her worth." Aphrodite could not argue. Psyche had completed every task. She had descended to the underworld and returned. Even a goddess must acknowledge such achievement. Zeus declared his judgment. Psyche would be made immortal, raised to godhood so that she and Eros could be together for eternity without scandal. He called for a cup of ambrosia, the food of the gods that grants immortality. Hermes brought it, winged sandals glinting, a smile on his clever face. Psyche took the cup with trembling hands. She who had been born mortal, who had suffered and persevered and loved beyond reason, raised it to her lips. She drank. Fire and starlight filled her veins. Her mortal body burned away like morning mist, and something new, something eternal, took its place. When the light faded, Psyche stood transformed. Wings had sprouted from her shoulders, delicate butterfly wings, symbol of the soul she had always embodied. She was no longer Psyche the mortal princess. She was Psyche the goddess. Goddess of the soul, of the journey from mortality to divinity through love. Eros swept her into his arms, wings tangling with wings. Their kiss was the first between two gods who loved as equals for eternity. The gods cheered, even those who had feared to help her before. Apollo played his lyre. The Graces danced. Even Hera smiled, remembering her own fierce love. Zeus turned to Aphrodite. "Your son is married now properly to a goddess. There can be no shame in this union. Will you accept her?" Aphrodite's pride warred with something else. Perhaps respect for what Psyche had endured. Perhaps recognition that love had won, as love always does. She stepped forward and took Psyche's hands. Her grip was firm, her eyes still carried pride. But something like acceptance passed between them. "You have earned him," Aphrodite said quietly, so only Psyche could hear. "I could not destroy your love, so I will bless it instead." A wedding feast was called. The proper wedding that Eros and Psyche had never had. All of Olympus attended. Even the gods of the underworld sent gifts. Zeus himself presided over the ceremony. Eros and Psyche spoke vows that would bind them for eternity, not chains, but promises freely given. Aphrodite watched from her throne, and though her smile was small, it was real. Her son was happy. In the end, perhaps that was enough. The feast lasted for days, as divine feasts do. Music and laughter echoed across the heavens. Below, Mortals heard distant thunder and dreamed of love. In time, Psyche bore a daughter, a child born of love and the soul, called Hedone, which mortals would know as pleasure or bliss. Aphrodite held her granddaughter and felt something she had not expected, pure joy uncomplicated by jealousy. The child had her radiance, but Psyche's courage. And so the story found its ending, not in tragedy as so many divine tales do, but in reconciliation. Love had triumphed over jealousy and death itself. Psyche took her place among the gods, butterfly wings marking her as different. The mortal who had earned divinity through courage and impossible love. She became the goddess mortals prayed to when love seemed impossible, when the heart wanted what it could not have. She understood. She had been there. Eros continued his work, spreading desire through the world. But now he understood something new, that love is not just a feeling, but a choice renewed daily. Aphrodite herself was changed. The goddess of love had learned that love cannot be controlled, only tended. She became gentler, though no less powerful. And in that transformation lies the heart of their myth, that love changes everyone it touches, even gods. Especially gods. No one remains unchanged by true love. The story of Aphrodite and Psyche has been told for thousands of years. It spoke to the ancients, and it speaks to us still tonight. It tells us that beauty may inspire jealousy, but courage inspires respect. That even gods can learn from mortals who love without limit. It tells us that the soul, which Psyche represents, can endure any trial when love lights the way. That death itself cannot defeat a faithful heart. And it tells us that forgiveness is possible. That Aphrodite's final acceptance healed wounds older than memory. Love does not hold grudges forever. Tonight, as you rest, perhaps you carry your own impossible loves, your own divine jealousies, your own underworld journeys. Psyche's story says, do not despair. Every trial you face is another task completed. Every tear is another step toward your own transformation. The soul, like Psyche, was made to endure. And somewhere above, the goddess with butterfly wings watches those who love against all odds. She knows your struggle. She was mortal once too. Aphrodite too watches, less jealously now. She sees lovers who honor her gift, who do not take desire for granted. They receive her blessing. And Eros flies still, golden bow in hand, choosing where desire will bloom next. Perhaps tonight his arrow found someone thinking of love as they drift towards sleep. This is the power of the old stories. They carry truths that never grow old. Beauty, jealousy, courage, love. The human heart has not changed in 3,000 years. We tell these tales to remember what matters, to honor those who came before, to comfort ourselves when love seems impossible. The myths abide. And now this telling too joins the great river of stories flowing through time. From ancient Greece to your ears tonight, across thousands of years. Thank you for walking through the underworld with Psyche, for standing before Aphrodite's rage, for believing that love can conquer even death. The goddess of the soul would be proud of you. You listened. You imagined. You kept faith with an ancient tale. That is its own kind of courage. Rest now as Psyche rested after her trials. The hard part is over. Only peace remains. Let your eyes close. Let the story carry you to dreams. The story of Psyche was not Aphrodite's only tale of love. The goddess herself loved many times across the ages, mortals and gods alike. There was Adonis, the most beautiful mortal man ever born. Even Aphrodite, who had seen divine beauty, was struck breathless by his face. She first saw him as a baby, born from a mirror tree where his mother had been transformed. Aphrodite knew then that she would love him. She hid him in a chest and gave him to Persephone for safekeeping. But the queen of the dead also fell in love with him, and neither goddess would let him go. Zeus himself had to intervene, decreeing that Adonis would spend part of each year with each goddess. Above ground with Aphrodite, below with Persephone. When Adonis was with Aphrodite, she abandoned Olympus to hunt beside him in the forests. The goddess of love became a goddess of the wild chase. She warned him never to hunt dangerous beasts, Boars, lions, anything that might fight back. But Adonis was young and brave, and did not listen. One day while she was away he encountered a great wild boar. Some say Ares sent it in jealousy. Others say it was simply fate. The boar gored him. Adonis fell in the flowers of the forest, his blood flowing into the earth. When Aphrodite found him, he was already dying. She wept over his body, and where her tears fell mixed with his blood, the first anemone flowers bloomed. Red, fragile, beautiful, and brief. This is what the Greeks understood, that even divine love cannot protect us from mortality. Beauty fades. Youth passes. Death comes for everyone, even those loved by gods. Yet Aphrodite's love for Adonis also brought him a kind of immortality. He is remembered still, 3,000 years later. Love preserves what death would erase. Aphrodite also loved Anchises, a Trojan prince who tended cattle on Mount Ida. She came to him disguised as a mortal woman, and he believed her. Only afterward did she reveal her true nature. Anchises was terrified. Mortals who lay with gods often suffered terrible fates, but Aphrodite calmed his fear. From their union came Aeneas, who would survive the fall of Troy and found what would become Rome. Aphrodite's love shaped nations. And then there was Paris, the Trojan prince which goddess was most beautiful, and whose choice would destroy his city. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each wanted the golden apple inscribed, for the fairest. Each offered Paris a bribe for his vote. Hera offered him power over all kingdoms. Athena offered wisdom and victory in war. But Aphrodite offered the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite. He gave her the apple, and she gave him Helen of Sparta, another man's wife, sparking the Trojan War. 10 years of war, countless deaths, a civilization destroyed, all because of love, desire, and a goddess's vanity. This too is Aphrodite's realm. The Greeks did not pretend that love was only gentle. They knew its capacity for destruction. Aphrodite represented both the blessing and the curse. Her symbols reflected this complexity. Roses are beautiful, but they have thorns. Doves are gentle, but sparrows are fierce. Love encompasses all of this. The sea from which she was born is beautiful but dangerous. It gives life through fish and trade, but it also drowns sailors. So too with love. And remember how she was born, from violence, from Kronos severing Ouranos. Beauty came from terrible beginnings. Perhaps all beauty does. The story of Psyche adds another layer. The soul, Psyche in Greek, must undergo trials to be worthy of love. Growth requires suffering. Psyche's curiosity, looking when she was told not to look, is not condemned by the myth. It is the beginning of her transformation, not her downfall. The Greeks understood that we cannot love what we do not know. Blind faith is not enough. Psyche needed to see Eros to truly love him. Even Aphrodite's jealousy serves the story. Without obstacles, without tests, how would Psyche have proven herself? The villain makes the hero. These truths still resonate. Love is not simple. Beauty is not safe. The soul must grow through difficulty. The oldest stories knew what we still learn. This is what Aphrodite's myths gave the world, not just entertainment, but wisdom. The understanding that love, in all its forms, is worth its price. When Rome conquered Greece, they did not destroy Greek religion. They adopted it. Aphrodite became Venus, and her worship spread across an empire. The Romans claimed Venus as their ancestor through Aeneas, Aphrodite's son. Julius Caesar himself traced his bloodline to the goddess of love. Venus became more than a goddess. She was a symbol of Roman civilization itself. Temples in her honor rose across 3 continents. When Rome fell and Christianity rose, Venus did not disappear, she transformed. The goddess of love became a symbol in art, poetry, and philosophy. Botticelli painted her birth in 1485, rising from the sea on her shell, just as the ancient Greeks described. That image still defines beauty today. The story of Cupid and Psyche, the Roman names for Eros and the soul, was painted, sculpted, and written about throughout the Renaissance and beyond. Apuleius wrote their tale in the 2nd century, and his version shaped every retelling since. From that Roman novel, the story reached our time. Shakespeare drew on Venus in his early poem, exploring desire's power to obsess and consume. The goddess lived on in English verse. The planet Venus was named for her, the brightest light in our sky besides the sun and moon. Even the heavens bear her name. The word venerate comes from Venus. So does venereal. The goddess gave her name to worship and to passion's consequences both. Psyche's name gave us psychology, the study of the soul. Every therapist who helps us understand ourselves works in her tradition. In the 20th century, scholars saw in Psyche's story the first fairy tale, the template for Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, and countless others. The tasks Aphrodite gave, sorting seeds, gathering fleece, fetching water, descending to death, echo in every quest story we tell. The goddess wrote our narrative vocabulary. Films retell her story still. Every romance where love must overcome jealousy. Every tale where beauty causes trouble. Aphrodite's influence flows through them. The goddess appears in modern novels, video games, and songs. She has been reimagined 1,000 times, but her core truth remains unchanged. We still speak of being struck by Cupid's arrow. We still describe overwhelming attraction as being under Venus's spell. The old gods live in our language. 3,000 years after Greek poets first sang of Aphrodite, we still struggle with the same questions she embodies. What is beauty? What is love? Why do we desire? The goddess born from sea foam has no end, because love has no end. As long as hearts beat and beauty stirs us, Aphrodite lives. And so we come to the end of our journey tonight. From the violence of the beginning to the peace of love fulfilled. What a distance we have traveled. We watched a goddess born from sea foam, rising in beauty that would shape worlds. We saw her take her place among the Olympians. We witnessed her tangled loves, the faithful husband she could not love, the war god she could not resist, the mortal boy who broke her heart. And we followed Psyche through trials that would have broken lesser souls. Through jealousy and impossible tasks, through the underworld itself to immortality earned. These stories have been told for 3,000 years, passed from voice to voice, fire to fire, page to page. Tonight they pass to you. The ancient Greeks who first told these tales are long gone. But their words live on in every retelling, including this one, including now. We honor them tonight. The poets whose names we have forgotten, the grandmothers who whispered these tales to sleepy children, the priests who kept the old ways alive. They gave us Aphrodite. They gave us Psyche. They gave us the understanding that love is both blessing and trial, and worth every moment of both. Now let these images fade gently from your mind. Let the goddess return to her sea, the soul to its rest. The story is complete. Your eyes grow heavy now. The ancient words have done their work, carrying you from the waking world toward the shores of sleep. May Aphrodite bless your rest with gentle dreams. May Psyche's courage inspire your waking hours. May love, in all its forms, find you worthy. Sleep well, dear friend. The goddess watches over those who listen to the old stories. Until next time, rest in beauty. Rest in peace. Good night.